Greetings, dear friends. We continue working on the project. In this lesson, we will slightly deviate from the topic and focus on optimizing the project. Some students have complained that the site has started to slow down significantly. We are in the development stage, and on the local machine, the site takes a long time to load. This is indeed the case, and this aspect also irritates me a little. Let me remind you that we are on Windows and using Docker, and Docker has its specifics. When working on Windows, remember, in the very first lesson, when we created the project, we had to install WSL, that is the Linux system, inside Windows to make Docker run faster. Let's first understand and see the problem itself. Here I am refreshing the main page and counting the number of seconds. Normally, the site should have already refreshed, meaning it should take fractions of a second. But this process, you see, is still ongoing. So it took several seconds. It feels like about 6 seconds. Ideally, it should be a fraction of a second. We shouldn't have to wait this long. This is frustrating during the development stage. Now, let's go to our Docker Compose file and look at it. And remember how we created it. Docker creates containers in a Linux environment. But when we created our project, we made these volumes and store the project files on local Windows. Meaning, this folder creates all the WordPress files on our computer running Windows. I can even show you here the project you see. We have the folder and the source. And a directory is created for WordPress containing all the WordPress files, including those we upload from the admin panel. Here they are in the uploads folder. But it was manageable? Yes, we initially created this project, launched it, everything worked well, but when we started filling the project with plugins and added to the camera, and in WooCommerce, there are very, very many small files, and technically they are located on Windows. But the Docker container itself is located on Linux. And the more such small files are added to the project, Docker tracks them using these volumes and manages them. The more synchronization there is, the slower the system operates. Therefore, to address this issue and make the project faster, we will use the following approach. Firstly, we will move WordPress from our local synchronization to a volume on the Docker site itself. This means that the files will no longer be stored. Here, this step will speed up that is the page loading. But there is one downside, which is that all the files we uploaded are stored here on Windows. And here you have the folders the moment we create and match on the Linux side. These files will be lost, but they won't be lost because we will take care of it. We will simply transfer those files over there. I will show you in this lesson how this can be done, so be aware of this feature. And the second thing we will do is get rid of storing all the plugins, meaning we will still store them this way, but we will only synchronize our own. These specific 2 plugins and all the others will be stored here, just so they continue to work in the project and upon launch, so that the script had a source to take them from and send them to the working stepper before starting the modification. Guys, I recommend you create a backup. So you open your project and we are interested in the directory OD with the RVI. All the others are in our repository on GitHub and are not needed for now. But if both are local, then here we have WordPress and we will delete it later. More precisely, it will be deleted automatically since we will remove the containers, and here is exactly the folder with the files that we will restore. As for the database, in principle, nothing needs to be done because it is stored in the volume, and when we delete the container, we will only delete the container, not the volume. We will not delete it, and in theory, our database will remain. We just need to take care of the uploads files, transfer them, and that's basically it. Regarding the code, as I said, we are getting rid of local synchronization, but instead we create a volume on the Docker side. We need to give it a name. I will use WordPress core as the name for the WordPress files. The path. This path on Linux remains the same, yes, but it will have a separate volume. Next, when I create this volume, I do it here at the end of the file. I need to specify it in such a way. Now Docker will create this volume specifically on the Linux side, not on the Windows side. And then we will have to find the path to this volume and transfer there our files, which I mentioned further. For themes, leaving them as is since we have few files in the themes. Everything we are doing now is to ensure that there are not a large number of files in our project. Tens of thousands of files, like in WooCommerce. When we add one WooCommerce, 2 plugins, 3 plugins grow. This number of files affects speed. Therefore, in the plugins, we will now only perform the game store block synchronization. We copy its name, add it here, local folder. And in Linux, we also add the game store block. Next, the same plugin. For the second core game store. MY, we leave the plugins as they were, and the settings for the stove also remain as they were. Essentially, this one, with these 2 lines, instead of the entire plugins directory, I switched only to our specific 2 plugins. And now here's the thing, which is both a disadvantage and an advantage at the same time. Previously, when we updated a plugin through the admin panel or installed it, it would automatically appear here. Now, when updating or adding a plugin that is not related to these 2, there will be no modifications here. We will have to either manually drag the files here or use the command line to enter a command for updating or installing a specific plugin. But this is both a disadvantage and an advantage at the same time, because this way we can install some temporary plugins on the local machine. For example, reset WordPress or query monitor or regenerate thumbnail. That is any such working plugin that is needed for 5 minutes to perform some action, and it won't be constantly included here with us. That's the specificity. The next step, we need to inform Docker about our changes. To inform it, we essentially need to kill the current containers and recreate them anew. But kill them carefully. We'll use the docker compose down command. I say carefully. No need for any flags to avoid accidentally deleting volumes, because in the database, remember, we don't want to lose it yet. It stops and removes them, and then we will recreate them. Using the familiar command, docker compose about. If we look at Docker now, my project has disappeared. And take note, a new volume game store WordPress core was created. And the containers were already started. If I return here, I see that my containers are back and 3 images are present. Further, as far as I can see, the files, it didn't delete them, which is good. So we don't need to extract the local ones from the archive, from the backup now, and let's take a look at the site data. On the site, critical error. Let's try to log into the admin panel. We successfully logged into the admin panel. Let's open the site again. Could it be a temporary error? Was it? No, it's still a critical error. Let's go to the themes, plugins, The critical error is most likely caused by our code. Since these two plugins of ours are currently only in the environment, Windows, but we no longer see them, and we will have to reinstall them specifically in this environment, Linux, but our files, which we have been writing throughout the previous lessons, do not have a check for WooCommerce installation. And apparently they are creating these critical errors. If we go to Media, we will see the files. But actually it's a question of cache. Most likely our directory simply wasn't deleted. Here it is, WordPress. Since we didn't delete the will, and if we try to open a photo, it most likely won't open. Or no, because it doesn't exist 404, meaning the files need to be transferred now. I had a situation where I forgot to press record, and while I did everything, the process wasn't recorded, but it's no big deal. Now I'll show you which commands I ran. There were problems. I'll tell you about those too. Now, everything works perfectly. All the images are loading, and the images specifically, you see, are loading from the Linux environment. So let's move to our project. Look, we didn't delete the volumes and our source files are still here. That is the .srv folder. WordPress, everything is working perfectly. You go into the terminal. I'll do it again. Essentially, I'm going to overwrite everything I have there to simulate the actions I've already performed, executing the docker one ps command. I needed to get the ID of my current container. That is, I'm interested in the WordPress container. What I'm going to do now is take this folder and put it into the WordPress container, replacing the WordPress files with the new ones it created, thereby updating this new volume, and they will end up in this WordPress port, meaning the new volume. So I need the ID and I copy it from here, specifically from WordPress. Next, I run the command docker ito cp, specifying the local path in the Windows environment, srv, WordPress. Then I specify the container ID and the path already on. The Linux side, it's R in HTML. I click OK. It now starts transferring the files. These files are being transferred there. This took a few seconds and it transferred 177 megabytes to my new container. Let's go to the site, refresh the admin panel. Here we see, yes, let's refresh the site. In principle, we have no changes here. But what did I encounter? I encountered the issue that when I tried to install a plugin, the error disappeared only after I installed this WooCommerce plugin. I did tell you yes, because it wasn't activated, our files were giving critical errors and the front end wasn't working. As soon as I activated it, the front end automatically started working. But when I tried to install it, let's say I tried to install another one, I couldn't do anything. Even now I still can't, because when transferring the WordPress files, or rather not WordPress, but the file system changed. The access to the files. That is from Windows 3D. I transferred it there and this chmod to the files is closed. And WordPress cannot add anything in the WP content directory and generally in WP uploads. Let's start a new terminal. What did I do? I tried to kill the containers again. When we do it without flags, our volumes remain, so it can be done without any problems. And I started it. Essentially, it didn't help. I just simulated from memory what I did again. But our configurations changed. Therefore, let's take another configuration for our WordPress image from the docs. And then I tried again. The next command. Atishnik. This command listed all files and directories and showed their details. Permissions. Here are those permissions. We are interested in this directory VP content. And WordPress does not have write access to it. Then I tried I did not run this command in that way. I first entered the Docker into our container and only then tried it. To run, I think, yes, I already forgot myself. It took a little time, meaning it didn't work out for me right away. I had to tinker with it. So, apparently our command is not being interpreted. Let's take a look. On the site, if nothing has crashed, and as long as the permissions haven't changed, I must have launched something else, but I've already forgotten. When I go from here, I'll check what there are currently files. Everything is great. The installation process has started. Here is the classic editor. It has been installed. I'll delete it now. Successfully enabled. Essentially, we need to enter Docker with this command using the ID of our container. And enter this command. This is the second command inserted. For directories, we can also specify for files. And it will take a few seconds to execute, but the most important thing is that we solved the problem. Now any plugin can be installed direct without asking anymore. And now, returning to our project. This can be sent to the server to continue the course. But now, when adding plugins here, they will not be included. We will have to manually add the plugins that should be present in the repositories and monitor them. We spent a little time on their updates, but you can see how quickly everything works, by the way. We're not saying goodbye yet. This directory is no longer needed here. I can select it and delete it. Only the database remains as it is in a local volume. And let's check the site just in case. Of course, everything works because at this stage it is already using another volume inside the Linux system. And everything works very quickly for us. Now we can finish this lesson and see you in the next session.